Hello everyone. I am Professor Anuradha Jain, Professor of Economics at Vivekananda Institute of Professional Studies. Today in this session, we are going to discuss the elasticity of demand. All of us have studied and know about demand. What is demand? Demand and law of demand states that if price of a commodity increases, then quantity demanded will fall. And if price of commodity falls, then quantity demanded will increase. So law of demand indicates only the direction of the change in quantity demanded in response to change in price. But when we talk about elasticity of demand, then elasticity of demand talk about how much or to what extent the quantity demanded will change in response to the change in the determinants of the demand. So what is elasticity? Like if price rises by 10%, what happens to demand? As per the law of demand, we all know that when price rises, then demand will fall. But by how much? By more than 10% or less than 10%? So elasticity measures the extent to which demand will change. Now, if you want to define the elasticity of demand, then elasticity of demand is nothing but the degree of responsiveness. It means that the extent to which quantity demanded of a commodity increases or decreases in response to increase or decrease in its price or any other determinant. So we have several types of elasticity of demand according to the source of change in demand. For example, like if price is a source of change, then we have price elasticity of demand. So the elasticity of demand in a market is great or small according to as the amount demanded increases or little for a given fall in price and diminishes much or little for a given rise in price according to the Marshall. And now according to the source of change, there are different types of elasticity of demand, like there is price elasticity of demand, there is cross elasticity of demand, which is the elasticity in relation to change in price of one commodity to the change in demand for the other commodity. Then there is also elasticity, income elasticity of demand or advertisement elasticity of demand. Now, elasticity of demand as we have defined according to the degree of change, like whether the demand changes more than the price or demand changes less than the price, then there are again different types of elasticity of demand, like demand can be perfectly elastic, it can be relatively elastic, it can be unitary elastic or relatively inelastic or perfectly inelastic. Now, if we talk about like price elasticity of demand, then what is price elasticity of demand? It is nothing but a measurement of percentage change in demand due to percentage change in its own price. That means the price of the commodity itself. So the price elasticity of demand may be defined as the ratio of relative change in demand and the price of the commodity. So elasticity of demand is equal to percentage change in quantity demanded divided by percentage change in price. So if you can see here, percentage change in quantity demanded, that means delta Q upon Q into 100. So delta Q is what? Delta Q means the change in quantity demanded. So it's a percentage change. It means percentage change can be defined as the change in quantity divided by the original quantity into 100 and the overall divided by the percentage change in price. That means the change in price divided by the original price into 100. And when we solve this formula, then symbolically you can define this or you can write this as delta Q upon delta P into P upon Q, and that will give you the elasticity of demand. Now, on the basis of the degree of price elasticity of demand, as we have discussed that there are 5 types, that means perfectly elastic, perfectly inelastic, unitary elastic, relatively elastic and relatively inelastic. Now, what is perfectly elastic demand? Now, when a small change in price of a commodity causes a major change in its demand, it is said to be perfectly elastic demand. Elastic means, you know, the feature of elastic. If somebody is elastic means it is stretchable. You can stretch that part there. So that means if demand is elastic, it means demand can change easily, and a slight change in price will lead to very high change in demand. So in perfectly elastic demand, a small rise in price results in a fall in a demand to maybe 0, equivalent to 0. So while a small fall in price causes increase in demand to infinity, a perfectly elastic demand refers to a situation when demand is infinite at the prevailing price. So if you want to draw the graph of perfectly elastic demand, then you can see here that the graph is the line shows the demand curve is parallel to x-axis. Parallel to x-axis means that elasticity of demand is equal to infinite because the change in quantity demanded is very, very high with the very, very small change in the price. Okay, so in perfectly elastic demand, a small rise in price results in fall in demand maybe equivalent to 0, or small rise in price, fall in price causes increase in demand to infinity. So the degree of elasticity of demand helps in defining the shape and slope of the demand curve. So here the slope of the demand curve is that it is parallel to x-axis, and this can be said that elasticity of demand is equal to infinite. So therefore the elasticity of demand can be determined by the slope of the demand curve. Flatter the slope of the demand curve, higher will be the elasticity of demand. Now opposite of this is the perfectly inelastic demand. Inelastic, something which is inelastic means you cannot change. So perfectly inelastic demand is one in which a change in price causes no change in quantity demanded. So it's a situation where even substantial change in price have demand unaffected or leave the demand unaffected. So therefore in this case the demand curve will be vertical, that means parallel to y-axis. So demand will remain fixed whatever is the price. You can see that when price is P3, then also demand is OQ. If price rises to P2, then also demand is OQ, or when price rises to P1, then also demand is OQ. So demand remains same whether price increases or price decreases. So that is known as perfectly inelastic demand. Now it can be interpreted here that again same thing, that it is parallel to y-axis and it will not change. So here elasticity of demand is equal to 0. Now perfectly inelastic demand, so demand remains constant for any value of price. Another type of demand, elasticity of demand, is unitary elastic demand. So unitary elastic demand means when proportionate change in demand produces the same change in the price of the product. So that means the demand is referred as unitary elastic demand. So at whatever percentage price changes, at the same rate demand also changes. Like suppose for example, if price increases by 10%, then demand will go down by 10% or vice versa. So that means proportionate change in quantity demanded is equal to proportionate change in price. So overall result is that elasticity of demand becomes equal, and this will be the slope of the demand curve, and it is also known as rectangular hyperbola. Okay, because it will be a straight line, and this type of curve where elasticity of demand is equal to 1 is known as rectangular hyperbola. Another type is relatively elastic demand. So relatively elastic demand refers to demand when proportionate change produced in demand is greater than the proportionate change in price, because you know the formula that percentage change in quantity demanded divided by percentage change in price. So elasticity of demand will be greater than 1 only when numerator is more than the denominator, and here the numerator is percentage change in quantity demanded. So relatively elastic demand is when percentage change in quantity demanded is more than the percentage change in price. So this again, it will be the shape of the demand curve. It will be downward sloping, obviously, because there is always inverse relationship between price and quantity demanded, but this curve will be little flatter curve because the slope shows that elasticity is more than 1. For example, just to explain you more about relatively elastic demand, if price of a product increases by 20% and demand for the product decreases by 25%, then the demand would be relatively elastic. So in this, the demand is more responsive to change in price. Another type of elasticity of demand here is relatively inelastic demand. So relatively inelastic demand is one when the percentage change produced in the demand is less than the percentage change in the price of the product. So that means numerator is less than the denominator, because numerator is the percentage change in quantity demanded. And this same can be explained with the help of example, like if price of a product increases by 30% and due to this increase in the price, the demand for the product decreases only by 10%, then the demand would be known as relatively inelastic demand. And here you can see that slope of the demand curve is steeper than the previous one, okay, because that is showing that demand curve is relatively inelastic here. And the numerical value of relatively elastic demand ranges between 0 to 1. So Marshall has termed relatively inelastic demand as elasticity being less than the unity. So overall, here you can see that all different types of the slope of the demand curve, like demand curve can be either straight line vertical parallel to y-axis, another can be parallel to x-axis, or downward sloping. Somewhere you can see that slope is less than 1, more than 1, depending upon the nature of the product, depending upon various other factors which affects the elasticity of demand. So this was all about price elasticity of demand. So on the basis of causes, as we have seen, there are other types of elasticity of demand also, and one of them is income elasticity of demand. So income elasticity of demand is a degree of responsiveness of quantity demanded of a commodity due to change in the consumer's income, other things remaining constant. Like price elasticity of demand is due to the change in the price of the commodity. Similarly, income elasticity of demand is due to the change in the income of the consumer. So in other words, you can say that it means like by how much the quantity demanded changes with response to the change in income. The income elasticity of demand is defined as percentage change in quantity demanded due to percentage change in the consumer's income. So here it will be delta Q upon delta Y. So Y here is the income of the consumer. Okay, so delta Q upon delta Y into Y upon Q is the formula to calculate the income elasticity of demand. Now suppose that, just to explain you the formula, now suppose that the initial income of a person is rupees 2000 and the quantity demanded for the commodity by him is 20 units. When his income increases to 3000, quantity demanded by him also increases to 40 units. Why? Because income and demand has direct relationship. So as income increases, demand also increases. So what will be the elasticity of demand here? So formula is delta Q. Now what is delta Q? Quantity demanded. Initially it was 20. Now because of the increase in the income, it is 40. So delta Q is 20. Similarly, delta Q upon delta Y. How much is the delta Y? Delta Y is 1000 because initially income was 2000. Now income is 3000. So delta Y will be 1000 and into Y upon Q. Now what is Y? Original income, that was 2000, and Q, that means original quantity, which is 20. So overall you can see that it is 2%. So income elasticity of demand in this case is 2. Okay, so similarly you can have many more examples like this. So what are the different types of income elasticity of demand? Just same as price elasticity of demand, there are different types of income elasticity of demand also, like positive income elasticity of demand. It means when elasticity of demand is greater than 0. Negative income elasticity of demand when E is less than 0. Or zero income, that means zero income elasticity. It means that when E is equal to 0. So when there is positive income elasticity of demand, so positive, in that case it can be equal to 1 or it can be greater than 1. Equal to 1 means when whatever percentage of the change in income is there, same percentage change in the demand for the commodity. Okay, so just same as price elasticity of demand, these different types of income elasticity of demand is there. So one by one briefly we can discuss fast about types of income elasticity of demand. So first is positive income elasticity of demand, that means when EY is greater than 0. So if there is direct relationship between income of the consumer and demand for the commodity, then income elasticity will be positive. And for all normal goods, income elasticity of demand is always positive. Now for example, like as the income of the consumer increases, they consume more of superior goods. On the contrary, as the income of the consumer decreases, they consume less of the luxurious goods or superior goods. So positive income elasticity can be further classified as income elasticity greater than 1, equal to 1 or less than 1. Now income elasticity greater than 1, that means greater than unity. So if the percentage change in quantity demanded for a commodity is greater than percentage change in the income of the consumer, then it is said to be greater than 1 because numerator is more than the denominator here. Now for example, when consumer's income rises by 3% and the demand rises by 7%, so in that case income elasticity is greater than 1. Now here you can see the graph is upward sloping. Why? Because there is direct relationship between income and demand. Okay, not like price elasticity, because between price and demand there is always inverse relationship. Now another case is when income elasticity equal to 1. Equal to 1 means again numerator is equal to denominator. So that means whatever change in the income is there, at the same rate demand is also changing. Like for example, when the consumer's income rises by 5% and the demand also rises by 5%, then it is the case of income elasticity equal to 1. And here you can see this graph, it will be almost from the 45-degree angle because both changes at the same rate. The next is income elasticity less than 1. Now if percentage change in quantity demanded for a commodity is less than the percentage change in income of the consumer, then it is said to be income greater than unity, elasticity of demand greater than unity. Now for example, if the consumer's income rises by 5% and the demand rises by 3%, so it is the case where income elasticity is less than 1. Now in the given figure you can see that quantity demanded and consumer's income is measured along x-axis and y-axis respectively. So the greater rise in income from OY to OY1 has caused small rise in the quantity demanded from OQ to OQ1. So thus the demand curve DD shows income elasticity which is less than 1. Another is negative income elasticity of demand. Now if there is inverse relationship between income of a consumer and the demand for a commodity, okay, then income elasticity will be negative. So that means that if the quantity demanded for a commodity decreases with the rise in income of the consumer or vice versa, so it is said to be negative income elasticity of demand, and in that case the slope will be downward sloping here. Now for example, like as income of a consumer increases, they either stop or consume less, and this is possible only in case of inferior goods. Because why we buy inferior goods? Just because we cannot afford to purchase the superior goods. So once income increases, your demand for inferior goods goes down and demand for superior goods increases. So in that case, income elasticity of demand for inferior goods will be negative. Another example is zero income elasticity of demand. So if there is no relationship between income and the demand, then there will be zero elasticity. So it means that if the quantity demanded for a commodity remain constant with any rise or fall in income of the consumer, then it is said to be zero elasticity of demand. For example, in case of basic necessities such as salt, kerosene, electricity, etc., there is zero income elasticity of demand, because basic necessities demand will remain same whatever be the level of income. Another type is cross elasticity of demand. Now cross elasticity is for those goods which are related goods, and you know that always demand are related demand also. Like sometimes goods are complementary goods, sometimes goods are substitutes to each other. So price of one affects the demand for the other. So in cross elasticity, we just see the relationship of price of one commodity and demand for the other related commodity. So here the formula become like percentage change in the quantity demanded of X divided by percentage change in the price of commodity Y, which is the related commodity, any other commodity. So there are two types of relationship between the commodities. Like commodities can be substitutes to each other, or commodities can be complementary to each other. Now in case of substitutes, cross elasticity of demand is always positive. Why? Because if price of one commodity goes down, then demand for the other commodity is bound to increase. Like for example, tea and coffee. When price of coffee increases, quantity demanded of tea decreases because both are substitute goods, and here slope of the demand curve will be upward sloping. Now in case of complementary goods, the things become opposite, because it will be downward sloping. Why? Because if price of one commodity increases, then demand for other commodity goes down. Like for example, car and petrol. If price of petrol increases, then demand for car which is run by petrol will go down. Okay, so therefore in case of complementary goods, there is inverse relationship and the slope will be downward sloping. And in case of unrelated goods, because there can be goods which are not related to each other, their cross elasticity of demand is zero, and here the demand curve will be vertical line. So a change in price of one commodity will not affect at all the demand of the other commodity, because they are not related at all. Okay, so this was about the concept of elasticity of demand, and this concept is very, very important, and I am sure you must have understood like what is elasticity of demand and what are the different types of elasticity of demand. So thank you so much, and we will be discussing more this in the other session.